say, luxurious Heat Nation. Yeah, Rosier Lago, down to Biscayne. Yikes. 5 on the floor, ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing, you can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frauds. Down to Biscayne. Kept the floor playing, got it all banned. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, it's about have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Also make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
It's an appropriate way to start this thing with me being on mute. I really don't want to talk about this season. Welcome into 5 on the Floor, where the Miami Heat season is over. Well, at least the regular season part of it. They've got a play-in game coming up on Wednesday. They lose today to the Washington Wizards at home by 1 point. We will get into a little bit what happened today. But overall, grand scheme of things, not that relevant. You know, this thing was settled the other night. So the Heat are going to be the 10 seed. They're going to Chicago on Wednesday. If they win that game, they'll play the loser of the Orlando-Atlanta game on Friday. If they win that, they would make the playoffs at 37-45, their worst record since 2014-2015. In that case, they would play the Cleveland Cavaliers, who've won more than 60 games this year. This would be one of the largest upsets in NBA history if the Miami Heat were to win that series in terms of the game differential between those teams. There have been some 1-8 upsets before. You look at way back when Seattle losing to Denver, that was the late Dikembe Mutombo leading that one. Of course, Philadelphia, Chicago, the series that Rose got hurt. There's been some, and of course the Knicks beating the Heat, but there was only a 6-game differential in that because that was a lockout shortened season. But this would be one of the greatest upsets in NBA history. It's not something that we are anticipating. And again, the season being mercifully over, I think some of us are ready to get to the offseason and see how this thing plays out. And I know some Heat fans are also. We will be getting into the draft pick ramifications and more on other episodes. But as we speak, the Warriors are about to play the Clippers in a game that will significantly impact the Heat more than today's Heat game will. So we'll probably do another episode later on when we figure out exactly where the Heat may be positioned in terms of their picks, and I'll be doing more of those with Adele. But again, the Heat lose today, 37-45. Greg Sylvander is with me today, back from not vacation. He was working. He has a real job, unlike me. And so he's back in the fold. I'll just let you, before we start on anything else today, your thoughts on the way that this played out over the last week.
I mean, it's kind of par for the course for the entire season. To me, this was a disappointing year, and it was reinforced over and over again. Ultimately, it was kind of the punctuation was the loss in Chicago, and there's just it's a forgettable year. And unfortunately, you have to say it's a disappointing season that you wish would have gone in a different direction. I'm not going to get a ton into the loss today because truthfully, it was kind of it was at least entertaining and competitive, and there were guys playing hard, but overall throughout the season to have, I think the broadcast said 17 losses by 5 points or less. That's the kind of excruciating types of losses that it's hard to break through that kind of stuff. And so we'll see what happens with the play-in, but ultimately for me, even though the team started to play better in the 6-game winning streak and Bam and Tyler started to, I think get more on the same page of how to lead this going forward. It didn't ultimately land in more victories. It didn't get them any closer to what needs to likely be a pretty big overhaul to get this thing corrected.
Yeah, and there were positives. We got into those. Eternal and I did the other day. There were like 5 positives we took out of the season, and then we got to 5 fairly easily. I mean, Davion Mitchell was a positive. Them picking a direction, or Jimmy forcing them to pick a direction, to me, ultimately will be viewed as a positive, even though it was painful to go through. pregnancy is painful too, but the end result is great. So that's so I think again, that's how I'm trying to look at some of these things. That not that I've ever had to endure the painful aspect of a pregnancy, so I probably should apologize to most women on this before we go forward. But anyway, Greg, besides the point, we came up with 5 things, and there are some things that were good about this season. But the majority of it was disappointing. I mean, Tyler Hero was probably the single biggest plus. If you look at his year, and he didn't play today, simply the fact that he played as many games as he did. Great credit to him for that, for answering the call on that. When Pat Riley called him fragile, he didn't get in his feelings. He just worked harder. And you look at his year, you can make a case that this was the best season by a Heat guard since maybe Dwayne's first season of the Big Three era. I mean, you can look at Dwayne's 15-16 was pretty good. Goran maybe in the 16-17 season when he and Waiters were playing together. But just statistically, this is the best season since Dwayne's 10-11. It is. And so you got to give Tyler credit for that. Even if you want to get on him for some of the late game decision making or any of that, he was nearly a 50-40-90 player this year. He ended up at 47, 38, and 88. That's pretty damn good. That's pretty damn efficient. And to me, the whole chucker thing, that's out the window now. Chuck that out the window. It's just the late game decision making and getting him help in those situations so that the burden is not on him. And I think that obviously is something they're going to need to look at, even if they choose to extend him, which is another conversation that we're going to be having after the season. But let's get into today. And there were some things here that were a little bit of a microcosm of the season. And I'm going to do this a little bit differently. Let's start with Lynette's play of the day. Oh, excuse me, player of the game. My bad.
And now it's time for the A-Aggressive Insurance Player of the Night, sponsored by our friend Lynette. You can find her at insurancebylynette.com. That's with 2 N's and 2 T's, insurancebylynette.com. If you need car insurance, renter's insurance, homeowner's insurance, or any other type of insurance, she's the person to go to. Based in Lauderhill, she services the entire Tri-County area here in South Florida, and she will make sure to get you the best deal. She'll probably talk to you about the Heat while you're at it. Reach out to her, insurancebylynette.com. And now, the player of the game.
Well, it's Haimey Hawkins, and I want to use this as a bit of a takeoff point. What did he end up with? 41? Is that
41, 10, and 7.
41, 10, and 7, 17 of 25 from the field, 5 of 7 from the line in 41 minutes. He started along with Ware, Highsmith, Duncan, Davion Mitchell. And then off the bench, and we'll get to some of these guys, Keshad Johnson, Kyle Anderson, Terry Rosier, and Josh Christopher all played off the bench. So they did get to 9 guys today. Could be the last home game for some players, including could be the last home game for Duncan Robinson. Honestly, he played 20 minutes today, but we don't know that the Heat are going to have another home game. They would have to get to the playoffs. He's got a partial guarantee for next year. They almost traded him last offseason. So, again, this could have been the last game for some of these guys here. Could be the last home game for Jaime Jaquez Jr., too, if they include him in a trade this summer. And I guess, Greg, what I take out of his performance today is this. We have speculated on why he had such a down season. And, he had one of the worst sophomore slumps in Miami Heat history. If you go through rookies who impressed and look at their second year, like, I got Willie Burton, okay? I mean, There's not a lot. Like Glenn Rice, Steve Smith, Tyler's second season. They all got better. Well, Tyler struggled some of the second season, but I think, again, that was the compressed time between the bubble and the next year. There was a legitimate reason for it, and he didn't decline to the degree that Hawkins did. Bam played more his second year. Wade obviously exploded into, a terrific player the second season. After his first season, he was playing point guard. He moved to the 2 next to Shaq when Shaq came in. You look at the rookies. Karan's second season was the one I think I would look at in this regard, in the sense of when we've compared him to Karan some, but Karan was hurt a lot his second season. He popped in the playoffs in a couple of games, but otherwise he was a little disappointing his second year. So I guess there's some equivalency there. But it's rare for a guy to go backwards the way that Jaime did. And I think what today showed to some degree is it wasn't some kind of lingering injury. I think it's this. I think it's just that better competition, because he looked like this in Summer League too. He looked great.
Mm-hmm.
When he played against better competition that was armed with scouting against him, he struggled. Now, if he goes against weaker competition like he did today, this Washington team that's a mess, he still can get his, okay, because he has a certain skill set. But when you're going against teams that lock in defensively, he needs another act. That's what I feel like. Like, that's what I would take from today. Like, yeah, it was great to see him look healthy. But if he's been healthy all along, then that's a bigger problem here. Because I think we've been giving him the excuse of some lingering groin injury. It didn't look like it today.
No, and I mean, if you look at just run through the game log, he only scored 20 in one game this season. That was at Utah. I'm not even going to say the date because no one will remember that game. He had you're right in that, like, when you talk about a regression from a rookie season, it's probably the biggest contrast that the Heat have experienced from a rookie year to a sophomore year. And I think you're right in that it's a competition factor for him. At least today showed that somewhere in there is a productive player that, I mean, because other than today against the Washington Wizards, and we'll talk about how they lost, other than today, you started to wonder if it was still there at all. And so, like, the fact that he was able to get in a groove to go 17 of 25, take 25 shots in a game, I think that you have to hope that maybe he can build on that. I joked on playback in the chat that he could take this into next season when that's months away. So I don't want to overdo it, but it was a bad year for Jaime Jaquez. And that's just also, as we talk about things that contributed to the frustrating season, when you had such uncertainty surrounding Jimmy Butler, all we talked about last year was how Jaime was not the next Jimmy Butler, but kind of formed in the image of a Jimmy Butler-like player. And then so for Jimmy to kind of take a back seat this year and Jaime not be able to step up, that was a big roadblock for them because I think everyone expected that to be some sort of a transition and it never happened.
Yeah, and now they've got a guy in Wiggins that's blocking his path. So there is really no path for him to that spot. And also Pelle Larsson outplayed him late in the season and moved ahead of him in the rotation. So it looks like he may have a role here in the play-in, whereas I don't really know what Jaime's role is. So Heat fans shouldn't overreact to the performance today. I don't want to poo-poo it too much, but like we saw Oladipo score 40 against Orlando, and that's what this reminded me of. But then with Oladipo, at least it was like, okay, there's a role for him in the playoffs, like a short, as long as he was healthy, a short minute role where he could, guard the point of attack, which is something that they needed, and provide a little bit of spark in transition. I don't really know what the role is for Jaime, but I think what the role this offseason has to be, or at least the role of the people working with him has to be, it can't just be I got to become a knockdown shooter or a lockdown defender. I don't think that's going to happen. The shot is not it's not good enough. I think it's got to improve, but that's not where he's going to ultimately pop. He has to be able to get going against better defensive competition. And that requires breaking down his game and figuring it out in that regard, or else I don't know what the future is here. Now, I will say this, at least he was on the court. Jovic has had trouble staying on the court, even though I thought he had a better season than Jaime when he played. But it was a down year in terms of both of those players because we really, with Jaime, I think we know more than we want to now, which is frustrating. And with Jovic, I think we just still don't know enough. Like we see it in pockets. We're like, okay, this is going to be a productive player for them. He's young. He's got a high upside, I believe, in a lot of different ways. But with what group? And it's just finding a group for him is hard when he hasn't been healthy. It's not his fault, just like it wasn't Tyler's fault, okay? And I just think we need to get past that. But you still need to make decisions on players, and they've got extension conversation coming up with Jovic too. And I don't see how you can do that with what we've seen, so far. So anyway, that's where we're at with that. I'm going to use these to get into some other stuff today. Let's do the play of the night.
And now it's time for the X-Ray of the Play of the Day, brought to us by our friends over at Mobile C-Arm and Staffing Services. Nelson and his team will bring the X-ray equipment and the staffing to you. If you work in a hospital or a medical office, get a consultation today at c-armandstaffing.com or give them a call at 561-891-9620. Their fleet of trucks at your service. Again, it's Mobile C-Arm and Staffing Services, 561-891-9620. And now, the X-ray of the play of the day.
Okay, this feels like piling on. Which Rosier play do you want to pick?
As the play of the game?
I mean, I don't care what happened with the result here. I'm more interested in how we looked at things for the totality of the season. Can I just give you this? Here, hold on. Terry Rosier played 34 minutes tonight. He was 1 of 9 from the floor, 0 of 4 from 3. He did have 1 assist, 1 turnover, 6 rebounds, 2 points. This is someone, and so for play of the day, I mean, you can pick any of the layups that he left short. There were shots that Brady noticed when he was in the game, like he won't take now. Now he won't even take a shot. How did this happen? I just don't understand. I've never seen, we can talk about Jaquez, but like, I've never seen a guy who was averaging 23 points with other positive counting stats. I know it was a bad team in Charlotte, but the efficiency was not that bad. Okay. He just does not look like a functional, and he's going against the G League Wizards today and can't get going. Like I thought he would have the Oladipo game. I really did. Like I thought anybody was going to have it. It was him, this fool's gold thing. Oh, we got Terry. He can't even provide that anymore. What do you do with him this offseason? I don't, and I don't want to pile on because it's like, we've been doing that all year, but they were counting on him to be like their 4th leading scorer this year. And it's like, he's literally like, he's the least functional player on the team. And he's got 24 million coming next year.
In retrospect, when you think about the fact that Terry Rosier was kind of brought in as the last shot in the arm of the Jimmy Butler build. And so to think that we're at a place where he's basically non-functional, and to your point about how much money he makes, we know that that's a problem. I think they're going to really, I mean, he will be an expiring contract, and I think that they will probably try to look to use that money in a deal for a more high impact player. So, I mean, if we're going to put a positive spin on it, it's that his contract expires soon. It baffles me that he would lose. It's weird because like Terry Rosier, I would consider him to be like one of those Antoine Walker like players that has irrational confidence and will just take shots. And sometimes you just got to live with the results of bad shots and things like that. But Rosier has sunk to a level that you just don't see often. And like that kind of confidence to be lost completely to the point where he is, I mean, today, 1 of 9, I think is a microcosm of absolutely how every other moment went for him throughout the entire season. It's just unprecedented for them to kind of sink a draft pick into a trade for a player that they thought was going to be a high impact fit around their other guys, and him completely lose his career trajectory has changed from literally being a $20 million player, Ethan, to when he gets up to be a free agent, he may be a vet minimum contract now.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just crazy.
He might be playing behind Kendrick Nunn overseas. Kendrick has become, can't get back in the league and has become one of the best players overseas, just signed a huge contract. Kendrick Nunn was never this frustrating with Miami. I know he had a Jaquez problem where teams started to scout him, realize he wouldn't pass, and it got him out of the league because he wasn't really a 2. He wasn't big enough to be a 2 really, and he just didn't pass enough to be a 1 and all that. But like he was never at this level. Like this is really, we talk about Jaquez's second year sophomore slump being kind of unprecedented for the Heat. This is unprecedented. Like for them to whiff on a play, and we whiffed on it too because we all were fine with the trade at first. There has to be some other explanation. It can't just be he lost confidence. There has to be something else. I talked to him. I mean, is the neck? It was off court stuff. I don't know. Okay, but like, I talked to him in the Bahamas, and he said he thought he could be a high level player until his late 30s. Mm-hmm. He just crossed 30.
He didn't lack confidence in that interview.
No, he said he was going to prove everybody wrong that he's been keeping notes, and I don't. And it's not like it's not like this isn't a role thing. They went into the season, handed him the starting point guard job, and leaned into him offensively in a way that pissed off Jimmy. Not Rosier specifically, but the overall lean towards
the
Terry,
guards.
Tyler, and Bam, right? But Terry and Tyler in particular, and to have it be this bad, and then the real funny part of it is that like Terry was the only one who was in Jimmy's corner in the entire Heat locker room by the end. Him and Nico, that was it. So, but
you're like, trust me, Terry, we would have included you had we could.
Right, exactly. But then the funny part of that is like, so one of the things that irritated Jimmy was he didn't get enough help, but they went out to get Terry as help, but he was angry at the Heat, but not at Terry, who provided the least possible help that a $25 million player could provide.
Was traded for Jimmy's best friend, which just makes it even that much weirder. The whole scenario that Jimmy requested in Miami and the Heat delivered to him in Kyle Lowry, for anyone who's not following.
Well, he traded Jimmy's closest friend on the team initially for Lowry, which was Goran, and then traded Lowry to get Rosier to give Jimmy help. And Rosier had this kind of year, and yet the guy that Jimmy still had respect for in the locker room was Terry. It's a very strange confluence of events, I will say. But look, he's probably going to be on the roster next year. So they have to figure out a way to make this work. I mean, you can't have $25 million. And again, he's not going to get that incentive because he had to play 70 games, which he didn't, and make the second round of the playoffs, which they won't. So he's not going to get that incentive. So he loses out on a couple $1 million, like $1.7 million. But the rest of it, 24, whatever, is guaranteed. So this is going to be on the books. And until they get closer to the trade deadline, it's going to be very hard for them to move that. And we'll see how many teams want the cap space in 26. There may be more, and they may take him on. Maybe somebody thinks they can rehabilitate him and to make a backup role, combo guard. Maybe, but maybe a Lou Williams type role. But as far as him being a starting point guard in the NBA, that looks over. I don't see how there's any way he can get back to that level. And I think there may be more answers that come out about this later on, because there has to be some explanation. I've seen players lose their confidence. That happens. Players go through stretches, but just to be incapable of doing anything anymore. Like, he can't finish at the rim. He can't shoot. He never really defended. So
he stole rebounds from Bam. That's one thing he
stole rebounds from Bam. He was kind of trying to steal points from Jaquez today. And then there's also the thing about, then there's the other mystery of this season, which I really would love to get to the bottom, is why Spoelstra stuck with it so long. So many minutes for him. So many minutes in the fourth quarter, playing entire fourth quarters when really the season got away. And it's the single biggest reason that they finished under 500, I think. Okay, I don't think they were going to be an elite team no matter what, with Jimmy, without Jimmy. It's certainly the Jimmy situation sunk them deeper into the play-in than they probably would have been. I don't think they could have been higher than a 5 seed at best under the circumstances, the way that things played out, even if things had gone perfectly with Jimmy. But the Rosier minutes and how bad they were and how bad they were late in the fourth quarter probably cost them 5 or 6 wins at least. And you're looking at a team that's 37
early in the season. Yeah. It got off to a really on a wrong foot, and they couldn't ever recover. And in a conference where parity is so crazy, like, you can't be a 37-win team and expect to go very far. And a lot of people are going to remember this year for the Heat losing Jimmy Butler, trading Jimmy Butler, but in essence, that breakup taking place. But on the court, when you really think about just the basketball aspects of this, you're right. Like, the Rosier and Jaquez insistence early in the season, I think probably was part of the biggest reason why they could never kind of turn this around and get on a streak. I mean, the 6-game winning streak was fun, and it was all by double digits. So you thought maybe there's something building there, but ultimately they couldn't sustain. It's the story of the season.
All right, let's get to defending the house.
And now it's time for our Defending the House segment, sponsored by our friends over at The Real Estate Shop. You can find them at realestateshopfl.com. That's with 2 P's and an E, realestateshopfl.com, or at the Fort Lauderdale Realtor on Instagram. This is Javier Iglesias and Amanda Martin. They help buyers and sellers in real estate. They're nimble and protective of their clients. They service the entire Tri-County area. That's Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties with a proven on-market strategy. The real estate shop sellers earn the most money in the shortest time frame because Amanda and Javier have a deep understanding of the local market. So check them out. Again, it's at the Fort Lauderdale Realtor on Instagram, realestateshopfl.com, or give them a call at 954-268-9812. And now, who defended the house?
All right, we're going to do this differently here as well. But to me, the most disappointing part of this season was you couldn't even defend the Southeast Division.
Mm-hmm.
And that was with the two teams that finished above you, who are going to play in the 7-8 play-in, having lots of issues of their own. Okay. The Magic got off to a fast start this season, but finished 41-41 because it was like Paolo got hurt, Franz got hurt, Suggs got hurt, Paolo comes back, Franz comes back. They have trouble integrating it. They couldn't score. They still finished 4 games ahead of the Heat. Okay. And one of those games was a game that they came back from like 20 down or whatever against Miami. The other one was the Hawks. Okay. Who they lost. Their best player was becoming Jalen Johnson, not Trae Young. They lost. I understand the things that Trae Young does well, but Jalen Johnson is like a winning type player. Okay. They lost him for the season pretty early on. All right. They're incorporating, yes, a first overall pick in Rosier, who played much better over the last half of the season. But they were going through a ton of transitions on that team. They finished 40-42 ahead of the Heat. The Hawks always find their way into that kind of 37-41 win area. The fact that Miami couldn't sustain enough to at least push those teams until the very end is one of my disappointments of the season, because this was a garbage division. I remember, look, it was crazy because at one point Charlotte was 0-13 against the Southeast, 0-13 against this division.
Mm-hmm.
And the Heat handed them their first division win. What did they actually finish with? Is that their only division win? Hold on a second. They were the Hornets were, yes, their only division win was against Miami. 1-15, worst record of any team in the league against its own division, and that came against the Southeast. And Miami gave them that win. Again, I understand the Jimmy situation. We talk about Rosier. We talk about Jaquez. This is not to the standard. It's not to the standard. Like this is a division that the Heat should win. And I know the divisions don't mean what they used to. I'll keep saying that. And you don't hang division banners anymore. But you're in the Southeast, okay? These are teams that have been directionless for a long period of time. I know Orlando was supposed to pop a little bit more this year, but again, the injuries, their injuries were as significant as any teams in the East, okay? Any team that was supposed to contend this year. And for Miami to finish behind them, finish behind Atlanta, and then essentially be in a position where if they win this game and they end the Bulls season for the 3rd straight year, which we'll talk about that going forward into Wednesday and how the Bulls have changed now since those last two years. If they win that, and again, Miami being behind Chicago is ridiculous too, because they traded they let go DeRozan in the offseason. They traded Levine this year, still had finished ahead of Miami. And now you're waiting for the loser of the Orlando-Atlanta game. It's not great. It's not great. This is not going to be one that goes in the record books as something to celebrate. So I'll let you handle this, Greg, as we finish. Next year, are we going to having this same conversation? You got 30 seconds to answer because we have about 6 months of podcast to do on it.
Yeah, I'm not giving up all of the content, but I mean, this is since we're in the defending the house segment, the Heat did with the 8th best defensive rating in the league and still only 37 wins. I mean, what does that say for so many other aspects of the game that didn't go right? I think that there are paths for this to turn around. So as much as I've said that this is disappointing, that this has been hard to kind of get through, you're kind of trudging the road through this season. It's not hopeless to me because you have one, and it kind of reminds me of the way that I felt the year after LeBron left and the Heat, kind of finished that year in a tough spot. They had traded for Dragic, but and I think that was when they drafted Bam, if I'm remembering correctly. Maybe it's
they drafted Bam after the 16-17 season, where everybody was upset that they kept winning and dropped in the draft. That was the year they went 30-11 in the second half.
So I get that vibe that they can turn this around, that there are building blocks within the roster. I think Ware popped in certain, places this year, particularly with the vertical spacing. This team, that's an element they didn't have. So there's stuff to build on, but there's a lot of work to be done, because this team, you can just tell, is probably, if you bring back the same group, you can't expect to be much better than a 40-win team. And that's like around an 8th seed. You're still in that play-in conversation. So I would expect them to probably be pretty aggressive to figure out a move out of it. It's just, can you figure out something and actually get the transaction done? That's, I think, the question that the Heat fans ask.
What you need this offseason is Kel'el Ware to get better, not worse, because I think what he did this year was really promising, and it finished in a positive way also. And yes, they're going to need to add to this with some pieces, because I'm with you. I think if you look at just this core, it's hard to imagine them as better than 500. And, again, lot we go back through all these games, the timeout in Detroit and all the blown leads and all this stuff. But, I mean, the product, they ended about where they should have ultimately, even if their net rating was better than their record. I think they still hung above the flat line with net rating somehow, like 0.1 or something like that, because of that blowout win the other night. So I feel like I'll check it, but I think they stayed above with the 1-point loss. But, so you can say, wow, they should have been 41-41. Nah, if you watched it, you knew better. Anyway, Greg, appreciate it. We'll have more. Now we're going to pivot to an actual game on Wednesday that matters. Do the Heat have a magic trick left in them? We will see. All right. Thanks to our sponsors for being here all year long. Check out the other content on YouTube and across the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Have a good one.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. After all, someone needs to listen to my dad.